this is the first time we are meeting after Eid. I know this Eid was very different than uh, our Eids before, and for some of you, it was your first Eid. And But Alhamdulillah, we thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for our health. We thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we were able to celebrate Eid in whatever small way or little way, but we we were able to fast in the month of Ramadan and gain the blessings of the month of fasting. Inshallah, we will continue with our Thursday sessions, which will be around this time. And our Sunday morning Quran class will resume, inshallah, this Sunday. Today we are very honored to have with us Imam Khalid Griggs from Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Imam Khalid, I'm happy to say that is a very good, close friend of mine, and we have worked in many programs, projects, organizations together. And Imam Khalid Griggs used to live in Washington, D.C., studied here. You took Shahada in D.C. as well, Imam Khalid? Yes, and he was part of the and a totally African American brothers and sisters Islamic party, and they did some great work. And then Imam Khalid moved to North Carolina, and now he's Imam in Winston-Salem, and he because of his health challenges, he has cut down many of his activities. He was associate chaplain at Wake Forest, and but mashallah, he writes, he continues to go and give lectures, and he is editor of the Message International magazine, along with many other roles that he plays. Imam Khalid just told me that he is expecting a contractor to come to his place in any moment. So he is going to be taking a couple of minutes from here to have the contractor in and do whatever he has to do. So today, inshallah, as we know that what happened in Minnesota, it was not the first time. It has been happening repeatedly in our country. And sadly speaking, it is an issue that America has failed to properly address. And Imam Khalid has written a lot about it. And he's with us today, inshallah, and he will address this from Islamic perspective, from the society. What are the issues in our system, in the system of this nation and country that still encourages this kind of violence? If it is being a young man just jogging in the streets and getting killed, or a person, surrounded by 4 officers fully loaded and still not letting him stand up and breathe. So it's just horrible that we all saw. So Imam Khalid Griggs, welcome to our class. Thank you.
Jazakallah. Thank you so much, Brother Naeem. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Brothers and sisters, one of the health challenges that I've had recently has been an issue with my vocal cords. And I think it's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's way of telling me to shut up and reflect and read and develop my iman more. And so if my voice starts to sound a little hoarse, it's just a symptom of what I'm sort of going through at this particular moment. And I want to say, Brother Naeem, at the very beginning, that there are very few brothers who could ask me to participate in a webinar at this particular point. And I would say yes. As a matter of fact, this is the first time since I started having this particular problem that I have joined any webinar. So alhamdulillah, Brother Naeem is a very dear friend, and I respect him highly. Brothers and sisters, there is basically, from my humble opinion, there's a very simplistic way to try to look at what happened with George Floyd in Minneapolis on Tuesday, to try to figure out what would be the underlying conditions. Why would not only the situation with George Floyd happen, but why would this act be repeated so often and with different scenarios? But no matter what the scenario is with this encounter with African-American men, with police from all over, police departments from all over the country, too often it has ended in a tragic way that Floyd's life was taken this past Tuesday in Minneapolis. And so I want to start by just trying to set this into a historical context as it relates to this country. And I don't know how many of you know about the origin of the history of police departments and policing efforts in the United States. But the model for the modern day police department and police patrols has its origin and root in the slave patrols that were organized first in the state of South Carolina in the early 1700s, actually when it was just one of the 13 colonies of this country. And the economy of the South was an economy that was based almost exclusively on slavery. And because of this dependence on chattel slaves to drive the economy and for the southern states to develop the kind of economic sufficiency that they had developed, the plantation owners were very, very concerned about slave rebellions. And they were very concerned, if not about rebellions, they were concerned about slaves, enslaved Africans escaping from the plantations. And so these planters, these plantation owners enlisted and empowered, but they enlisted men to serve as slave patrols. These would be individuals who would not only seek out those who had escaped from the plantation and bring them back to their owners, but they were also charged with the responsibility of enforcing order beyond the words of the plantation owner, simply meaning that these individuals had an official capacity and they were empowered by whatever colony in the South that they were a part of to terrorize, to do whatever's necessary to keep this population, this enslaved population, in line. And so from as early as the 1700s, and I think in South Carolina, these slave patrols are believed to have started in 1704. And after the end of slavery, what we find is that the model that was established in the early 1700s continued. And that model continued into the present day. And what we find as well, when we look at the nature of the people who were part of these slave patrols, historically, they were typically some of the most racist, some of the most callous, some of the most unfeeling human beings that could be recruited. And so they were often recruited because of this nature, their disposition. But at the core of this disposition and the reasons for recruitment was slavery. It was the hatred that these individuals had for people of African descent. And so this is a tremendous issue as it relates to the origin of policing in the United States. It was a tremendously racist foundation for a start of an institution that we are seeing today. And one of these issues, one of the concerns that, and Brother Naeem, it seems like I may not have to get off because it sounds like I'm hearing the contractor being able to get in. I hear somebody back in a sealed off part of the house. I hope it's him and not someone trying to relieve me of some tools or something that are back there. So inshallah, I won't have to get off the phone. But because of the nature of these individuals, they were very well suited to enforce the order. They were recruited not only for their racism and their cruelty to individuals of color, but they were also recruited to protect the property and the lives of the privileged class, of these planners, of these rich folks. And so without going through an entire history of this origin up until the present day, suffice it to say that the issue of structural racism that was put into place during the colonial and development days in this country was an issue that was never resolved. And oftentimes we think about racism as just being one individual, like we see today, individuals calling the police on African-American men and women while these individuals are just carrying out normal functions. They may have their children at a swimming pool. Most recently in Central Park, this white lady called the police on a man who was watching birds in a section of Central Park where a lot of the birds would gather. And the man chastised the woman because her dog was unleashed and the dog would scare birds away. The man just happened to be on the board of the Audubon Society in New York City. And as he took a film of this thing and it got back to her employer, she was immediately fired from her job. There was no reason, there was no explanation for her actions other than her disdain for Black folks and Black men in this particular instance. And so oftentimes we think of racism as only taking this individual kind of form, that one individual or a group of individuals, whether a part of a group like the Ku Klux Klan, like the neo-Nazis, like the skinheads, and some of these other groups that we have in the country and have had in the country for so many decades. We think that that is the only form of racism that's impacting our institutions in this country, where this is not the fact. Those individuals do not have the capacity to maintain institutional racism without that racism being systematically employed by those who are the power brokers in the society. What I mean by this, as specifically as it relates to what we saw and what we're seeing unfold in Minneapolis today, is that the police departments and the Minneapolis Police Department, which is a department that has a long history of discrimination and physical abuse against people of African descent, and just like many police departments across the country, that this is an example within these police departments of structural institutional racism that has never been dealt with in this country. Many people correctly identify racism as the original sin, if it could be such a thing, in this country. But institutional racism is that vehicle that maintains in economic institutions like banks, insurance companies, in religious institutions, that this institutional racism is that beast that maintains a system of discrimination. And even when those like law enforcement officers are empowered to use deadly force in their jobs and they're conducting their jobs, they're not authorized to be the capturer, the judge, and the executioner, but they are trained to use deadly force when they think that their lives are being threatened. Many institutions, many agencies in this country who review the works and actions of the police have made it very clear that the excuse that many police officers are using, that we are afraid of these people, that there's never an excuse to take an individual's life because the police officer is claiming that he's afraid of the people that he has to police. There are reports that the Federal Bureau of Investigation, their internal reports that have become public, there are reports where they have documented through their study of local police departments that there are significant numbers of ultra racists, whether they be Klansmen or neo-Nazis or skinheads, who not only have been recruited, but are active officers in these various police departments across the country. And so what the point that I'm attempting to make is that when we look at the institution of policing, if we look at these police departments across the country, the FBI and those researchers and social scientists have studied and have acknowledged the finds of their research that one of the causes of these kinds of police actions against Black people in particular and people of color in general is because they harbor, these individual officers harbor certain hatred and resentment against those people, Black people in particular, and people of color in general. And so that is kind of the Cliff Note version of how we can rightfully begin to try to understand what is going on with these seemingly unending stream of African-American males being shot down or being brutalized. I'm sure everyone is very familiar with the very high-profile tragedy that occurred in New York City a couple of years ago with Eric Gardner, who was selling loose cigarettes or loosies in front of this building in a business area district. And police officers, what is called dogpiling, just collectively jumped on Eric Gardner. And one in particular had him down on the sidewalk. And as he pleaded for his life and appealed to this officer that I can't breathe, you're choking off my breath, he was choked out. He was actually strangled to death by the use of a chokehold that was used by this officer that was not sanctioned or authorized by the police department. If you could just excuse me just for 1 second, I just need to send a very quick text, Brother Naeem, to let the man in the back of my house know what's going on. If you have any questions up to this point, please go on and ask the question, and I'll hear it as I do this brief text, and I'll come back and answer your question, and we'll continue to move forward, inshallah.
No, Jazakallah khair. And that was a very good introduction to this this whole situation that we are witnessing in the country, and the issue of violence committed by the state against African Americans, and especially the issue that our society is facing. Now, when we, I think we're witnessing protests. Protests, happened in New York after Eric Garner was killed. Protests happened in St. Louis. Protests happened in Florida. You name it. But as you just said, that these killings are not stopping. This violence is not stopping. And what steps can we, American Muslims, take in order to not only just give our voice on this issue, but to help the nation move towards some sort of resolution? What role can we play in this?
Yeah, it's a very good question, Brother Naeem. And I think it starts on a very fundamental level, and that is the level of not being a part of the problem. When I talked about the institutional racism infecting so many aspects of American society, the media is one of the main protectors of this mentality, to feed a mentality, a certain jaded view of Black folks and people of color in this country. For an example, the reaction that the people in Minneapolis, and I'm not trying to justify any kind of criminal behavior, but the reaction that those who were so frustrated with this officer, this one guy who had his neck on George Floyd's, his knee on his neck, was in that position with one of his hands in his pocket, like he's being cool, looking down at a man pleading for his life, looking at him like he's a trophy, an animal that has been caught, and this is his trophy. It was a very disgusting presentation to see the video of this man, I guess we could have to call him a man, but this person, this very callous human being who displayed so little regard. But when the people who were observing right there on hand, who had seen with their own eyes in real time what had happened, and when those who saw the video that was documenting what was going on, when they saw it, there was a kind of spontaneous eruption. And it's been the role of the corporate media in particular for you and I and for the Muslim community and just for Americans in general, but I'm addressing in particular the Muslim community in particular, for us to have more disdain and hatred for the reaction to a cold-blooded cop killer murdering a man while he's pleading for his life. He had no weapon. The video shows he was not resisting arrest, none of those things. But the media, my wife was looking at, one of these mainstream media formats. I think it was ABC News or one of these things today. And I happened to walk through the room where the television was on, and I saw how it was being reported and how these reporters were just talking so much about they can't believe that people would burn these buildings, and they can't believe it's such a moral outrage that people would destroy property in the way that they're destroying the property, and the way that this corporate media presents cases like this. That what happens is that the people who are watching this stuff, if we are not mature in our understanding of what is going on, we will hate urban rebellions, which are called riots by the corporate media. These are urban rebellions. They are not riot. They are not just happening for no reason. These are urban rebellion carried out by those who are part, for the most part, of the undercarriage, the institutionalized, deliberately set in stone undercarriage of United States society. So first and foremost, we as Muslims should educate ourselves to the social realities of this country that we, as Malcolm X has so eloquently put it so many decades ago, that we end up loving the oppressor and hating the oppressed, just like George Floyd, the people who are spontaneously rebelling in the only way that is available to them right now. This is, literally, this is the only way that they can show their complete outrage. It can't happen. Ilhan Omar, with all of the wonderful work that she's done in the US Congress and what she has done locally there in Minneapolis and in the state of Minnesota, she does not have the capacity as a US Congressperson to intervene, not only in this instance, but to prevent this from happening by this police department. Keith Ellison, a Muslim who was a 2 or 3 term congressman from Minneapolis, representing that district that included part of Minneapolis, is now the state attorney general. As the state attorney general, he cannot stop the police department in Minneapolis or any city in Minnesota, individual or groups of officers, from carrying out these kinds of acts. Ilhan Omar, Keith Ellison, as our Muslim brothers and sisters, they have a sensitivity to the issue. But the point that I'm trying to make is that because of institutional racism in the judicial system, in the prison industrial complex, in the policing canons, their beliefs, their organizations, this plague of blue, we think that the COVID-19 pandemic is a very difficult plague or pandemic to try to navigate our lives. But try being an African-American male in the United States and have to try to navigate the blue plague that has been a part of the reality that African American, in particular men, I'm not ignoring victims of police murders like Sandra Bland and others, but the majority of these folks are African American males. So, I'm sorry, going off on a tangent on that, but first and foremost, I think we have to educate ourselves. Don't be a part of the problem. Don't be one who is trying to maintain the integrity of corrupt institutions. Don't be the one that would take the side of whoever is identified as a criminal or some kind of threat to the peace and tranquility in American society. Don't be that one, because either through our silence or through our speaking out in support of racist, vile actions coming from these racist institutions, we are a part of the problem and not a part of the solution. So specifically, I suggest, and Brother Naeem will provide you with, and I'm sure you already have it, but I'll provide you with a reading list and maybe some videos that you can share with this wonderful group that you have. You know, inshallah, I wish you all could transport here to North Carolina and have the same kind of group led by Brother Naeem that you have there in Virginia and wherever else you all may hail from. But I think that we have to read, we have to educate ourselves. We have to, within our institutions, we have within our masajid, within our Muslim organizations, we have to raise these issues. But first, I'm not saying we have to be experts, because I'm not an expert in anything, but what we don't have to be experts in this field in order to try to encourage our Muslim institutions to be on the right side of history. What we are finding today is that if it were not for a centuries-long damnation of Black people in general and African American males in particular, this issue that we find ourselves, this period that we find ourselves in, where, you know, who's the next Black guy that's going to get shot down or killed by the police, or who's the next Black guy that's going to be jogging through a neighborhood and self-professed vigilantes will shoot this person down for doing nothing other than jogging through a neighborhood, that you and I have to be a part of a solution process. It begins by educating ourselves. It begins by helping to educate other Muslims. It begins by helping to influence. These are issues that no matter how long you've been Muslim, it's part of your fitra to know what is wrong. And if you and I are so Muslim that we don't see how horrendous and how haram and how against human nature, against any precept of social justice, if you and I can't see that, it doesn't matter how long we have been Muslim. If we don't see that, something is wrong with our Islam. And so I thank Brother Naeem for allowing me to share a little bit with you guys to raise this issue, to try to raise it to the point that you feel as sincerely as I feel that this issue is an undeclared national emergency. Were it not for institutional racism, this killing of unarmed people of color, particularly Black males. It would be part of a declaration of a national emergency. All bets would be off, that this would have to be stopped, that no matter what it takes to end this kind of depraved targeting of a significant portion of the population in this country, it is nothing short of being depraved. You should join all of us, no matter how long you've been Muslim. Your natural instincts should make you feel that this is something that is totally unacceptable for any civilized society, and totally haram and unacceptable for us as Muslims, charged with responsibility of enjoining right conduct and forbidding wrong conduct, for us to sit silently and not try to take actions to stop this nonsense from continuing. Are there other questions?
Jazakallah khair, Imam Khalid. You pointed out the commandment from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, ta'awanu al-birri wa taqwa wa la ta'awanu al-ithmi wal udwan, that cooperate and work toward in the aspects of piety and khair and good in the society, and do not cooperate in evil of any sort. And I also remind myself and all of us that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also reminds us in the Qur'an, and this portion of the ayah where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "I'dilu," be just, huwa aqrabu lit-taqwa, that it is next to piety.
It's next to
such
piety.
such an emphasis by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on being just. And I really feel that as American Muslim community, we can really provide leadership to the country when it comes to racial justice, when it comes to issues of equality, when it comes to issues of economic justice in our nation and our country. And we are witnessing, people are talking about, people of color are dying much more by COVID. Yes, because of the
Right.
Institutionalized racism that exists in the country,
Right.
where people do not have access to have proper health care, where people are living in extreme poverty,
Yep.
10 or 12 people in an apartment. So obviously they are going to get much more sicker and
Exactly.
will be impacted by it.
Exactly. Even
So,
not even having access to healthy food, all these food deserts that
absolutely.
in communities of people of color, and it's all part of. I'm not a conspiracy guy, but it's all part of what we can aptly and correctly identify as institutional racism. Is nothing short of that.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions, my brothers and sisters?
I have a question.
Yes.
From Imam. So, can you hear me okay?
Yes, yes.
Thank you. It's such an honor to be here and listen to your words. Thank you so much for being here with us. I'm Faj. I work very closely with Imam Naeem, and I work with the kids in juvenile hall, like, the youth detention center. Is it overwhelming information to to ask? You're saying don't be part of the problem, and we're talking to a revert class. Is it too much to how then can we be involved if we can't get people to understand that it's okay to listen to this, that it's okay to be immersed into it? Like, some people are shy from it. They don't want to get involved because they think, that's great, you're working on it, but I don't want my daughter or my son to be involved.
Right. If you could excuse me, Imam Naeem, excuse me 1 second. I have to get this door for 1 quick second.
Sure.
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
Sure. I mentioned earlier, Imam Khalid Griggs has some contractor working, fixing some issues in his home, so he has to address that. So if you would like to write your question, you can write your questions. I know we have many brothers and sisters watching watching this program today on Facebook, you can also send your questions through Facebook, and we have our Dar al Hijrah team can send us the questions to Imam Khalid Griggs. It's definitely what we all saw just 2 days ago. The video, it just is so disturbing. It is so horrible. As Imam Khalid was saying, that just looking at the posture of the police officer, his hand in his pockets, and it's like nothing. And the George Floyd is pleading, "I cannot breathe, I cannot breathe." And people who are standing on the sides are telling the officers that the man is dying, he cannot breathe. But unfortunately and sadly, nobody did anything. Officers did not listen to that. And as American Muslims, our role, our responsibility is to raise awareness on these issues, learning what are the challenges that society is facing, and participating in these programs. Muslim organizations, at Muslim institutions, our masajid has a role to play in a big role, a major role to play in this area. We are in our communities, we are in our towns, we are in our cities, and reaching out to the society at large, reaching out to other places of worship, building coalitions, building cooperations and programs that can address these issues. And Alhamdulillah, at Dar Hijrah, we are not only offering service, we are not only providing food on weekly basis to the larger community, larger society, but at the same time, our outreach programs, our public affairs, our government affairs programs are engaged in addressing these issues. And as Sister Fazia, Deputy Director for Outreach and Interfaith Programs, was talking to us, she, mashallah, goes to Juvenile Center with her team, and they are offering mentorship to these kids who are, in some cases, Sister Fazia, 12, 13 years old, as I understand.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, the juvenile detention center in DC is usually from ages 13 to 18, but mentors can join us. They would have to be over 18.
Right, right. And what kind of issues you see among those kids?
Sometimes it's the safest place for them to be. When you let them out of the juvenile center, they might go home back into a bad situation. So for some of them, they're being detained at the youth center might be safer than going back out in the streets. And they would say to us, look, I'm glad you're telling us all these great things that we can be. And we try to encourage them to go to college and play games with them and encourage them and educate them on different making better moral and ethical decisions. But then you put them back out in the same situation, in the same streets, and then they have to go out and buy that gun to protect themselves, or whatever it is. And that is the big thing in Washington, D.C. right now. The police, these kids will tell you, the police are not interested in our drugs or anything like that. They're interested in weapons, because that's the number one problem right now. It's the access to gun and gun violence.
We have with us Brother Abdurrahman Mikhail, one of the community leaders, alhamdulillah. Brother Abdurrahman, would you like to say something? You can unmute.
Is Brother Khalid Griggs back with us?
Not yet. He's coming back.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure I remind him of something. I haven't spoken to him in over 25 years, and I want to make sure I connect with him before we end. But one of the things that I see, this is a very old problem, And as I was sitting there listening to Brother Khalid Griggs, it was like I was having this extra weight coming on me, remembering all of this trauma coming on me about all these deaths that I remember and all the trauma that we suffered as people of color in this community. And one of the things that I've seen, and we're becoming more educated on it as Muslims, is that we used to think we would not be affected by it because we were separate. Brother Khalid Griggs, I wanted to remind you, I haven't spoken to you in over 25 or 30 years. I'm originally from Cleveland, Ohio.
Oh, yes, Mikael. Yes. I remember now, man. I'm looking at you and I said, I know that brother from somewhere, man.
So it's been so many
How you
years,
doing?
And alhamdulillah, I'm busy with Dal Hijra now. I've been in Virginia for about
Alhamdulillah.
13 years. But I was telling him that I felt traumatized as you were speaking, because these are things that we've been talking about in our community for many years. And you were traumatizing me because I was remembering all these deaths and all these things that were going on and how it has affected me. But the other thing I was saying, part of our problem as Muslims is that we thought that we were separated from this because it was affecting somebody else besides us. It's not me. But now I think we're becoming more educated because we're seeing our own people murdered in the same fashion, and they're identified as the new. I always say I'll say the new Negro, because it's like not about color; it's about people who have identified these people of color, and now Muslims are the people of color, no matter who we are. So we have to use the pulpit that we have to make our people have to stand up, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, for justice.
Yes.
Because that's what we have to do. It's inhumane. As you say, this is not about being Muslim or non-Muslim. This is about humanity. And we are, it traumatized me just to think about what we're seeing. The people are just inhumane.
Yes. Yeah, that's an excellent point that you're making. And to be quite honest, Ahmed Arbery, coming so close behind the jogger who was chased down and shot and killed, it was depressing. I mean, not, inshallah, I'm hoping it wasn't clinically depressing for me, but it was very depressing. First, this man being chased down and killed, and then this police officer. The visual, I mean, I don't know if you all have seen any portion of this video, but to just look at the expression on this man's face, it's almost like a soulless person for someone on the ground pleading for their life. And he's, this is what he's doing. But it wasn't the first racially motivated incident that this joker has been involved in. He and one of the other officers with him had been involved in a number of racially motivated incidents like this, but not resulting in death the way that this one had. So one point, Brother Mikael, that you made about the awakening and the epiphany that many Muslims are having now in this country, that my income, my job, my status as a doctor or whatever is not a guarantor that I'm not going to be treated like the other. Brother Imam Naeem, can I get real for 1 second?
Sure.
I don't want anyone to get angry with me, and I'm not trying to insult anybody.
No, we are just trying to be honest, and this is the topic. It's a difficult topic, but we have to be honest.
Okay, so being honest, I think with many of our immigrant Muslim brothers and sisters, depending on the country that they come from, they have been granted honorary white citizenship coming into the country by being classified as being white. And so this kind of honorary citizenship is something that is part of a continuing institutional racist system. Mm-hmm. Brother Naeem and Imam Naeem and I spent a couple of weeks together in South Africa. And one of the major concerns that I had with many of our Southeast Asian brothers, and they're living in South Africa, that I even expressed to some of them that they had to be careful not to take the place of that former ruling class, white class, that classified them in a colored or Indian category. And because of that, their status was socially above the Black African indigenous people. And so I think that we have to be careful in this country, our brothers and sisters, that because certain amenities and certain access has been granted because you're not Black. You can be anything in this country other than being Black, well, at least I ain't Black. I got that going for me. We have to be careful that that doesn't become a part of our collective consciousness in the Muslim community. Because when that mentality sets in, we will never be able to feel and to hurt and to cry for other people of color, particularly these African Americans who are suffering and going through this period since being forcibly brought to America. It stopped. It's just taken different forms over the years. But so we have to be careful not to embrace this idea about, well, at least I ain't Black, so that must means I'm ahead of them. And as long as we have this false idea, notion about ourselves, then we cannot empathize. We have a president in office today that seems to be incapable of empathy. And so there's certain characteristics and qualities that a person has to possess in order to feel empathy for other people. And Islam gives us, if we are short or deficient in any of those areas, the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and the Qur'an itself gives us gives us the tools that we need to be empathetic with those who are suffering from dhulm and those who are in need of our support and our assistance and our help.
So I have a few questions, Imam Khalid. I have from Facebook, Imam Jawad Ahmed has asked, can you guide us, American Muslims, on what steps to take to raise voice against police brutality? I also have a question from Sister Hawa that Salam, is communalism the proper approach to a united community? Does it provide the appropriate social context to avoid hate and end discrimination? With school at the center and the police to be trusted sources that leads to justice and not racist police brutality. Another question.
Now, if you go now, you see all this gray on my face. It's therefore. So if you start asking too many questions, ain't no way in the world I'm gonna remember all of those questions. So let's just start with from Imam Jawad, the question about steps. What steps do we take to get involved in this in a meaningful way in this particular issue? I would say that there are organizations that are focusing in Muslim organizations that are attempting to focus on these issues, not just talking about, but in proactive and constructive ways, engage the society and engage others in trying to combat these issues of institutional and just individual acts of racism. And I would be remiss if I didn't say the Council for Social Justice of the Islamic Circle of North America. This is an organization that Brother Naeem, who used to be the executive director of the organization, that I'm very familiar with my involvement as well. And but I want, and this issue is so tremendous that I think that it would be to our advantage as Muslims to try to form coalitions with even the non-Muslim groups who are addressing this issue. We shouldn't feel that now that we are maturing as a community in this country, that we are the first to think about this issue or to try to organize around this issue or to speak out against this issue. There are religious and other organizations that are not faith-based organizations that are currently addressing and have been addressing this particular problem. And so I think, we need to make sure that we have, and Brother Naeem, Imam Naeem can help you with this, make sure that you have the contact, and the Council for Social Justice can provide that with other groups and organizations that are doing similar kind of work. But no matter what else other groups are doing, we have the divinely mandated responsibility to step forward and to be involved in these issues. There's certain things we don't have to try to reinvent the wheel. There are other groups and organizations, and if we come together, we're living in a time right now of a heightened sense of intersectionality. I think that's how you pronounce it, intersectionality. One of the upcoming events that was planned as a physical multi-thousand gathering in Washington, D.C. has, because of COVID-19, has changed now to a digital platform, is the Poor People's Campaign that is scheduled for June the 20th of this year. And a lot more information will be circulating through the Muslim community. This Poor People's Campaign, Imam Naeem, without taking up a lot of time, is a continuation of the work that was initiated during the modern day civil rights era, and particularly the work of Dr. Martin Luther King, that he had planned and it actually took place even after his assassination, but he had planned a Poor People's Campaign with a tent city on the Washington Monument. It was scheduled for May the 12th, Mother's Day of 1968. And of course, he was assassinated on April the 4th, 1968. But this was an attempt on the part of Dr. King to have a more assertive, a more aggressive, he said in this buildup to this event, that we don't have to go begging the congressmen and begging the senators to please do something for us, that we should go with the understanding that there's certain human rights. And it was almost sounding like El-Hajj Malik Shabazz, Malcolm X, that we should go with certain understanding that we have certain human rights that shouldn't have to be legislated to anybody. So let's start at that point of recognition and move forward. And Dr. William Barber and Reverend Barber and Reverend Liz Theo Harris are the co-chairs of this repairers of the breach who have organized this modern day Poor People's Campaign. And so I would encourage you all to register for it. The Council for Social Justice is, we're about to really put a lot of information out there about that. We are one of the co-sponsors of the event. And in the next few days, there'll be a lot of information that Imam Naeem and Brother Mikael and others will have to see how you can plug into this process. So, simple answer, the short one is through making strategic coalition, working in strategic coalitions. There's a difference because many Muslims have as I think, the misunderstanding that coalition and alliance are the same thing. So that if you are in a coalition, that you have people like who the gays or abortion on demand people or whoever it is, that taints you and your position as a Muslim. Coalitions are designed for us as Muslims to work with groups and individuals on around those issues of common agreement that we agree on. An alliance is different. There's a technical difference. An alliance is like the treaties that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ entered into with even the Mushrik tribes, that if somebody attacks you, we are with you. We are going to be a part of fighting against them, and we expect the same thing from you, right? Coalitions are not that kind of alliance. If there are homosexuals in a peace group, in an anti-racist group, that we are a part of a coalition. This is my personal opinion. In my personal understanding, we are not supporting what everybody who may choose to be a part of a particular coalition is doing. We are there for particular reasons, and we have to be educated that we are enough and mature enough in our political involvements that we understand this issue and we don't cross the line. This is why a lot of this work is not for every Muslim, right? It may be that everyone on this call today, that this kind of work, you may not be inclined to be involved in this kind of work. You may not feel that you want to be a part of this kind of work, and that's okay. It's just like any specialized area for us as Muslims and for non-Muslims. If we incline towards it, let's get the best understanding that we can about that particular area and work hard, fi sabilillah, in that area without violating any principles of Islam.
Jazakallah khair, Imam Khalid. Our time is up as well.
My voice is up too.
I see a hand from Rachel. Do you have a question?
Assalamu alaikum. How is everyone?
It
sounds like we're wrapping up, so I can hold off. No worries.
Imam Khalid, do you have a few minutes to take a question?
Yes.
Sure.
Okay. So in hearing more about the recent case with the officer kneeling on the gentleman's neck, it came to light that he had almost 12 incidences prior, 2 of which at least were shooting unarmed victims who, like you had mentioned before, hadn't died and maybe didn't make it to the media. But I guess as a public servant as well, who is paid by the same tax dollars that pays police officers, if I were to do something as egregious as to have earned a complaint, it would be public. So the fact that these precincts are able to bury these complaints again and again, what can we do as citizens of our county and our towns to advocate for policy changes to make these public?
Yeah, very, very good question. I think first is to determine if you're talking about a city police department or a county, the sheriff's department, whether they have a citizens review board.
Okay.
This is very opposed by, I would dare say, most police department and sheriff's department across the country. But in cities where a citizen review board, and you can try to do a little research on these things, it has to come, police departments are not going to say, well, what we need here is a citizens review board. It has to come through the demand, an organized demand from the community. If it's on a city level, it would probably come through city council and mayor. If it's on a county level, it would come through county commissioners. But it's work advocacy work that is extremely important. How they basically work, real quick, is that in cases like this and in other instances, it does not empower the citizens to make, in most of these cases, a final determination, because departments have to decide whether somebody's going to be fired or things like that. But it offers a respected and a organized voice for the citizens of a community to have input and say so into how the conduct of the police department and what should be done. In a lot of communities, and I don't know about Minneapolis, but in a lot police still have this concept of, they still have the formation of community patrols. Community patrols are essential for any city or area so that the policemen who are in a particular area are walking the beat. They know the people in the people in the area know them. And in areas and in cities and in districts where you have this, these patrols, these community patrols by the police officers, relations between the police and the community, I would dare say, are much better, and it proved to be much better than in areas where the officers are coming not only outside the city, but maybe driving across state lines to police communities that they have no relationship to, no contact with, no relatives in. And this is just a part of what contributes to these bad relationships between the community and the citizens and the police department when there's no connection. And so the citizen review boards, as well as community policing, I think are tools that we as a Muslim community should explore and advocate for on our city and county levels.
Jazakallah khair, Imam
Thank
Khalid.
you so much.
And we thank you for your time, mashallah. I mentioned earlier before in the beginning that Imam Khalid is not feeling well, and we can all see how Imam Khalid was struggling to speak. But we really are very, very thankful, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you and your family and give you shifa and good health, so that you can continue to lead us in the fight for justice and equality for all people. For all of us who just listen to Imam Khalid, I know there are many more questions that I'm seeing. It is what I am hearing, what I heard, all of us heard, is that our engagement in the community. We cannot be silent. We cannot just sit in our masjid and watch what is happening and think it will not happen to us. It is not about that. It is our role as Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, by his example, showed us in his life that even when he was being persecuted in Mecca, he stood up for the rights of those who were being oppressed. And he sallallahu alaihi wasallam helped and in the community, built that ukhuwah and brotherhood, with brothers and sisters from all backgrounds and ethnicities, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala teaches us in the Qur'an. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنَّا خَلَقْنَاكُم مِّن ذَكَرٍ وَأُنثَىٰ وَجَعَلْنَاكُمْ شُعُوبًا وَقَبَائِلَ لِتَعَارَفُوا إِنَّ أَكْرَمَكُمْ عِندَ اللَّهِ أَتْقَاكُمْ. That you have been raised from one pair of a male and female and made into nations and tribes so that you can know one another.
Mm.
And the best in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are those who are God conscious, who are muttaqeen, who are people who do good. And that good requires from us to be just. That good requires from us to raise voices when we see injustices happening in the society, and building coalitions, asking and checking with our counties, do they have citizen review boards? If not, we must fight to establish these review boards in our communities so that we can make people responsible when we see injustices taking place. And that must happen, my brothers and sisters, that all of us must take part in strengthening our community, in building these relationships and fighting for equality and justice in the society. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless all of you. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, again, thank you to Imam Khalid for sharing with us your thoughts on this matter. And to all of you, my brothers and sisters, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect you.
And Assalamu alaikum, Naeem.
Yes.
Before Imam Khalid, before he disappear in the abyss again, I won't put him on the spot now, but if you would tell Brother Naeem if you could pass your number to me, I want to talk to you.
Yeah, we're doing a telepath.
Yeah,
mental connection. Because I was going to say the same thing, and so
yeah,
Inshallah,
so definitely I'll get your
will,
number, inshallah.
Alhamdulillah,
Inshallah, we'll do that.
Because
we'll do that.
in all this time that I've seen you speak, I don't have the patience anymore for those big gatherings. So
Yeah.
I always miss you. So
Right.
Jazakallah khair.
Wow, Yakum, alhamdulillah.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. And
Okay.
inshallah, be safe, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us strength and wisdom to stand up for what is right and what is just. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.